So friends, please settle down. Honorable Minister has arrived. We would start this absolutely important session where we are focusing on India-South Africa partnership, but also on the larger role that India and South Africa can play in the global affairs. Honorable Madam Minister, it's a great honor and privilege for RIS to host you here in this small gathering, unlike what you attended earlier. In this small and absolutely interactive session, we have thought of, after the remarks of our Honorable Chairman, we would have a panel here to discuss India-South Africa partnership, where we requested two of our former High Commissioners in South Africa, Ambassador Virendra Gupta and Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, who have served in South Africa. They would be giving reflections, and then we requested two academics, one from South Africa and one from India. So from India, we have Dr. Ruchita Berry, who is a senior research associate with IDSA in New Delhi. And we also requested Dr. Pelani from Institute for Global Dialogue in South Africa to join. So this is absolutely fascinating panel. And then after that, we would have address by you, Honorable Minister, on 25 years of freedom in South Africa. And in the process, we would also request you to reflect on India-South Africa partnership, as we would be hosting Honorable President later at the Republic Day celebrations here in India, where we would be having several events lined up for barely 24-hour long visit of the Honorable President. In the morning, Madam Minister, we had another event where we explored possibilities of establishing a global development center, where we tried to see how unique development experiences of different countries in Asia and in Africa contribute to a very pluralistic narrative on development, may be different from Anglo-Saxon development model, but may provide a substantive basis and roadmap for us to see how our regional development banks and multilateral development banks, along with other IFIs, may contribute their finances as we are all collectively committed for sustainable development goals. With these words, friends, I once again warmly welcome you all here. We heard a lot since morning about what science, technology, innovation can play in our collective partnerships, what our commitment on SDGs can play, and how Addis Ababa Action Agenda can help all of us move forward on sustainable development goals. With these words, I once again very warmly welcome you and would request my chairman, Dr. Mohan Kumar, for his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sachin. Very good evening to all of you. I'd like to welcome the Honorable Deputy Minister for International Relations of South Africa. I had the occasion to listen to her at the Raisina dialogue last evening. Absolutely fantastic, with the equality and gender being the main themes of the Honorable Minister. If you look at the CV of the Minister, you will find education is an important aspect of what she's been doing. And I just learned, to my great pleasure, that she has just finished a doctorate in South Africa and will be a PhD in a matter of just a few months. I'd like to also recognize the presence of the Honorable High Commissioner Designate of South Africa to India, whom I also know. We've met a couple of times, and so it's a great pleasure, and I would like to welcome you and your colleagues. I'd like to thank two of my illustrious seniors, one Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, the other Ambassador Viru Gupta, both of them who perhaps are the last word when it comes to South Africa, actually. They followed each other in quick succession, and I cannot imagine two people more qualified to address the issue of India-South Africa relations. I'd like to thank the two academics from South Africa, India. Thank you, Sachin, for organizing this wonderful event. My only request, I'm not going to talk of bilateral relations because we have two ambassadors, and I think that will be dwelt at some length. I would like to, if you allow me, Minister, and if you are so inclined, to just get a South African perspective on what the world order looks like at this point. You know, it's clear that we are in the middle of a transition, and the multipolar order is not yet there. And does South Africa have views? What is the future of BRICS that you see? I think that would be interesting for me. Your perspective on the UN Security Council reforms would be interesting. And similarly, also the developmental challenges. India, for example, now feels that while we have taken advantage of globalization and open markets abroad, just as we are on the verge of really doing something spectacular, we find that external markets are being closed for us. And that's, it's a bit of a timing problem, but for example, honestly speaking, China, I think, has already taken full advantage of globalization. India has not. And that is an important difference. So it would be interesting to know if South Africa is concerned about protectionism. I know that you are a big trading country as well. Are you concerned as much as we are? So those are some of the issues, Honorable Minister, on which I would be personally very, very interested in hearing your views. But once again, not to take too much of your time, just to thank each and every one of you for having come here at this late hour. But I can promise you it'll be a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kumar. Now, friends, we would have panel with 4 panelists, and I would request each panelist to confine to 5 to 7 minutes. We can be speaking right from the table itself, so that we can have some time with the minister and some time for question-answer session. So, first in the series, I would request Ambassador Virendra Gupta for his remarks.
Thank you, Sachin. Honorable Minister, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very interesting topic before us, India-South Africa relationship. And the second part of the topic, what is the new world order? And how can India-South Africa impact on the new world order? As Ambassador Mohan Kumar said, is very difficult to understand, very difficult to fathom, let alone quantify the parameters of the new world order. Very clearly, it is something in flux. But surely enough, the world geopolitical structure is undergoing change. There is obviously a role which wasn't there earlier for countries like India and South Africa. And we'll have to figure out as to how we can do it either individually, bilaterally, or through plurilateral forums in which we are active. Now, we are active in IPSA. We are members of IPSA, but IPSA is not going anywhere. I think IPSA seems to have been abandoned by the 3 countries which have started this forum. When I was in South Africa, my several attempts to get it moving and get either a ministerial meeting or the summit meeting organized didn't get much traction. And the understanding given to me was that since we have BRICS, where was the need to have IPSA? Fair enough, but I think from India's perspective and from South Africa's perspective, IPSA was a very useful grouping in which China and Russia were not there, because if you look at the BRICS, there is a kind of disparity. It is not all that homogeneous grouping. So I think it was useful to work in a more homogeneous grouping of developing countries, emerging economies, countries which have fairly similar views on many world issues. So I would imagine that that the governments, if they were to be looking at the world order and these defining parameters as something that should serve our own respective national interest, then I think IPSA must be made more active. In the BRICS, we have clearly an opportunity, but BRICS itself is a work in progress. With China there now, China is beginning to muscle in, and more rapidly than what most of us had imagined. Now China would obviously want to drive this grouping into a direction in which we, the other countries, including India and South Africa and probably Brazil, we would not be comfortable. So while it's a nice grouping and you can give very attractive, impressive statistics about the number of people represented by BRICS countries and the kind of economy, the size, whatever, but how homogeneous BRICS would be, and whether BRICS would be able to serve any useful purpose from the standpoint of our foreign policy objectives, that again remains to be seen. Unless BRICS were to be expanded so as to dilute the influence of China and Russia, because we would want BRICS to act as a counterpoise, as an alternative, kind of viewpoint to the West. But we would certainly not want, at least from India's perspective, we would not want BRICS to develop into an anti-West organization. I think very briefly, the bilateral relationship between India and South Africa, I feel it is quite unique. It's become a cliche to describe a relationship as a strategic relationship. But if you look at the entirety of relationship, I think given the fact that we are both democracies, people at the popular level, the kind of perceptions that there are, the emotional connect that there is, I think very largely contributes to the depth of the understanding and depth of the relationship. So I think from that aspect, the very vibrant trade and economic relationship, huge investments that Indian companies have made, bilateral trade, I was looking at these statistics. In fact, unfortunately, the trade figures are lower today than about 6-7 years ago. From $15 billion, it has come to $10 billion. Not because of any lessening of relationship between India and South Africa, but because of the certain problems that we are witnessing in the world trade. I think defense cooperation is another very important aspect. For many years, we could not pursue the defense cooperation because of problems that Denel encountered in India. Happily, that is behind us. And India is a big market for defense hardware. And South Africa has developed technologies which I believe would be of considerable interest in India. So I think in the coming years we will see certainly potential for growing cooperation between India and South Africa in the defense field. Somebody talked about education. I think education and human resource development is another area where India and South Africa can do very interesting things together. In fact, when we were there, already a large number of South African students coming out of the college, so graduates, and they would, some of the Indian companies were sponsoring them to come to India. do a 6-month orientation finishing program so as to make them more employable. And I think this project was working very well. So there are many millions of ways in which India and South Africa can work together. Indian educational campuses can begin to create an exposure to South Africa, apart from getting South African students to India. I think this is an area which has, I think, not reached anywhere near the potential. And given the fact that development of a country or any country in the coming years is not going to be determined by the resource base, but by the human resource base. So I think that is an extremely important, and this is an area where India and South Africa can work together. I think in overall terms, when you look at the spectrum of countries and India's own priority attention for Africa. Now when we deal with South Africa, and